2024. We speak a lot about goals around here and many such things. But if you are maybe wanting to squeeze the most out of what's left in 2024, then this is the conversation for you. Welcome to another episode of the Reasons to Behold podcast with Tolu Talks.
And Arnold Reasons.
I have a question to start off this conversation. If you could have a conversation with yourself this time last year, based on some of the goals, things that you had set out to achieve last year, what would be some of your comments, encouragements, and pointers to yourself?
Well, one of them is that Bitcoin is going to come back fiercely. So load up on Bitcoin, load up on XRP, load up on everything. You see that redundancy package you got? Just put it into Bitcoin. That would have been me this time last year. That's the conversation, because I don't even want to look back at what the Bitcoin price was this time last year. So that would be one thing. I think the other thing would be execute better. Execute better, because I think that there have been some things this year that I wish I could have executed better on. And to be really honest with you, executing better doesn't actually take that much more effort than just executing, right? And I think that there is a move that I would like to make, especially next year, from I think I'm getting better at executing as a general thing, like doing the thing, but then the level of my execution is what I want to up.
How so?
I just think that done is good, right? Done is good. Is good. But there is also done better, right? And it's that thing from, good to great, better to best. Like, that's what I really want to be working on, because if I can execute better, which is faster to a higher quality, things will shift much, much quicker.
No, I love that, bro. I love that because I think it's very, very clear. It's a clear representation, I think, of the type of mindset that you have and we believe in around here, i.e., like constant improvement, constantly self-assessing, evaluating, and looking for the opportunities to do better and get better outcomes as well. If I was speaking to me this time last year, I think one of the things that I would be really probably putting a lot of focus on is just cutting out the noise and more of the distractions, and not just the obvious stuff, but the subtle stuff too. Because I think one thing that I have found probably in the later part of this year is that I actually thought that I had dialed in on cutting out distractions to a good degree, not maybe perfect, but I thought I've got a decent handle of this based on how it used to be, right? But I think I don't know what it was that led to me doing another review where I made some changes, like what I was messaging you about the other day with the lockdown on my phone. So, like, listeners, for their context, I have shut down pretty much the majority of notifications on my phone. Most things I do not see unless I manually go into an app and check. Some apps I've even deleted. And when I did that, I had like the initial kind of habit withdrawal kind of period immediately after, where I would still just go into apps and I would still do some of the same habits as before. But then after a few days, maybe a week passes, I noticed that I stopped going to my phone as much. I noticed that my productivity started to boost. And I think it's like, it comes back to something that I remember we might have spoken about on a previous episode, but the cost of task switching. And it's something that I've heard spoken about mostly in the context of just your work environment. So like, you're here working on this project, someone walks over, oh, have you got a quick minute? Cool. You've had to switch tasks to that. You're working on this project, then you now switch to something else that comes to your mind, and you're thinking, oh, I forgot I need to do this. Let me just quickly do this. So you move over to something else. So it's like, whether it's an external source or if it's to do with your own list and trying to get through the things that you need to get through, the true cost of task switching is something that is a lot more expensive than we realize, because
mm,
you can find
mm,
yourself doing lots of little bits on lots of
mm,
different things, but actually
mm,
finishing nothing.
mm,
Um, and so even
mm,
like stuff like what we've spoken about previously with making a list, ordering the list in terms of priority, so you can just focus on one thing. Those were the things that I thought, bro, I thought I did it. I'm in productivity land. Praise the Lord. Hallelujah. Right. But going through this extra step, particularly the later part of this year, has shown me that, you know what, there really are levels to this thing, because I
mm,
don't even feel like I'm even maxing out on how dialed in I can be when I'm on given tasks
mm,
and stuff like that as well. But I think it was a reminder that, like, when I've looked at how much I've been able to achieve and do since doing that, I think to myself, I wish I did this sooner. And then I wonder what else I would have done thereafter, having seen the fruit of that this time last year.
mm,
So I
mm,
think that would be one of the things for me.
mm. I think it's such an interesting thing because we all talk about productivity and doing more, but I think some of the really practical things around how you do that are really, really important. So I think that
Mm.
thing that you talked about minimizing code, not code switching, task switching, I
Yeah.
think is really, really,
You can
really,
call it
really
switch all you
important.
like.
Yeah, it ain't going to help you be more productive necessarily. uh, and I was just thinking about this thing that I'd heard about where, like, if something takes you 5 minutes or less, you just do it. And
Mm,
I was wondering about how do you balance those two things, right?
mm,
Because part of me is like, well, if I've gone to the bathroom and I see something, I should just do it, right? Like I should just, take that plate to the whatever. But how do you balance doing that kind of thing where actually you are getting stuff done quickly and well with I need to focus?
mm. I think it's a really good question. I think, to me, you have to run the plays and test it and see what works best for you. Because
Mm,
I know for me, like, I get into whatever I'm into, right? And so
mm,
I know that
mm,
there is a massive cost. Like, if they say that the cost was like times 50, hypothetically speaking, if you were to task switch, for me, it feels like it's times 1,000, because it's
mm.
like I get in my
Wow.
rhythm, I get in my flow, I'm proper in sync, which is why I
Mm,
think this stood out to me as such a big thing. But I think I would say run the play and run the test, because even using that example you mentioned, to me, if I saw that along the way, I would be asking myself, why didn't I deal with that sooner? Like, when I
yeah.
actually had the meal, why did I not take the
Yeah.
plate where it should have gone straight away? Because now I've created
Yeah.
more work for myself later on, when this could have been something
Yes.
that I addressed sooner. But
Mm,
again, I would still say run the plays, right? Because it- I don't know if there is just like one path to like
no.
maximum productivity.
Yeah.
But I think how you discover what the best path for you is by literally doing trial and error, testing and
Mm,
seeing,
mm,
right?
mm, mm, mm.
What do you think?
I do wonder if you're right. There's definitely not one play, right? There's never going to be one play that works 100% of the time.
Mm,
But I wonder if at a principle level, it's kind of like set yourself up for success, right? So for you, you know that for you to be set up for success, XYZ needs to be done before. So I need a clean environment before I start working. Yeah.
mm,
I'm a little bit less so like that. You can put me in a bomb site and I will just lock in. It's fine. Everybody's different. Some
mm,
people need, okay, you need a clean environment. I function better in a clean environment, but I don't need it. Right. So maybe it's okay. I spend half an hour sorting my environment before whatever time I need so that my environment is set. Yeah.
mm,
I lock in for X amount of time at a go with the little timer. You say, okay, this is my time to do this. You lock
mm.
in, you don't move, you don't do anything else. If you need to pee, you hold it. You just go. Do you know what I mean? Like no distractions. You just
Yeah.
lock in, you focus for that time. And that's where I think sometimes the discipline comes in, right? Because you're like, oh, now I need the time. And now I need no, 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 no. Just lock in for that half an hour. Do you know what I mean? No distractions.
Mm,
So I do wonder if that kind of thing might also work for people is set yourself up for success, whatever that looks like for you.
mm,
Have your block of time that nothing else interrupts and just see how you get. Because what I always find is that in that uninterrupted time, I get much further than I thought I would.
mm.
Because you're not task switching, you're not changing. So I do wonder if are some principles that just work.
No, for sure. And you know what? Again, feeding into it, something that I know has helped me is making more decisions in advance. And like part of that, if you
Mm,
use the example that you mentioned now, it's
mm,
like if I know I can work in a messy environment, because I can work in a messy environment if I need to, right?
yeah,
There are certain things
yeah,
that I can do, but they're pretty much going to be dysfunctional, maybe get a lesser version
yeah.
of me than my maximum,
Yes,
right? So if I'm able
yes.
to identify those things, rather than putting myself in a situation where Monday morning I'm coming to a messy desk and I now have to allocate 30, 45 minutes or whatever the time is to tidying the
Mm,
desk and creating that environment, how's about I actually start thinking about how I can maintain a clean environment with much less time,
yes,
right? I might
yeah.
say, out of principle, if I have anything on my table, I have a clear desk policy, right? Let's start there.
Mm,
At the end
mm,
of any given day, regardless of what has or hasn't been done, I will make the decision in advance to make sure that my desk is clear. If you want to go
mm,
even more micro than that, if I put something on my table like a plate and I finish eating, I make sure that I get rid of it straight away, right?
mm,
It's just,
mm,
and little
mm,
things like that, because I think by making that decision in advance and making that commitment up front, that's
mm,
something that can pay me over the long term and create even more time for me to dial in and focus on a daily basis. And I think you'll find more and more of those things that are eating into your productivity, or maybe like those little foxes that are like those little things that have such a big
mm,
impact. The
mm.
what's it, the leaven that leaven of the whole lump,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like you find that the yeast, if they don't know KJV
Yes.
language. but but yeah, like I think, yeah, those are some of
Mm.
my thoughts on it, bro.
And I think that that's the really interesting part where discipline starts to come in, right?
Mm,
Because if you make your decisions ahead and you stick to your decisions ahead of time, it's unlikely that what you've desired isn't going to come to pass. There's always going to be stuff that comes in that messes up your plans one way or another. But I think at the moment, it's often us that mess up our plans rather than external circumstances.
mm,
And that's
mm,
where like the discipline really comes into it. And you have to stick with the decisions that you've made. That's
mm,
what discipline really is.
mm. What do you think holds us back from being disciplined?
Hmm. I
And
think
whatever you answer, I want you to answer if you were speaking to Tolu that you feel like at some point in time was in need of just some real talk.
uh, I'm probably talking to myself right now, mate. Right now, because I think that, to be honest, right, I think that, and I'm trying to think about this as you, it's, you know, it's not even about as you get older, it's about as you get out of rhythm, right? So
Mm,
25-year-old me, yeah, I loved going to the gym. Yeah, I loved running for basketball. I
mm,
loved eating relatively well. I've been retired from basketball for probably 7 or 8 years. I'm so out of practice with doing the things that when I look back at now, I enjoyed doing the hard thing. I'm
mm,
just so out of practice. So one of the things is don't let yourself get out of practice, right? Discipline is a habit that builds and builds and grows in strength. It's a muscle. The
mm,
other thing is when you see yourself getting out of practice, do something quicker,
mm,
right? Make an intervention faster. Before it becomes 3 months since I've not shot a basketball, just go to the park for 15 minutes and go shoot a basketball, because
mm.
you get the aches and pains out of the way and you remember, oh, okay, I went 2 days ago, let me go again. You know,
Yeah.
don't let it be so long that you're out of the discipline.
Mm,
And
mm,
it comes with all the things that we're talking about, whether it's cleanliness, tidiness, focusing on your work that you need to do, your diet, your exercise. It's across even like your spiritual disciplines. It's
yeah.
all of these things. Don't just think, oh, because it's been so long. Because you know that thing of like when you look at your phone and you see a message, yeah, that you even started to reply to 2 weeks before and you didn't finish. Yeah. And you think, oh no, now it's too late. I've not
Yeah.
messaged Arnold back for 2 weeks. Yeah.
Mm,
Now it's too late. No, because then you leave it and now it's been 4 weeks. But if actually you message Arnold 2 weeks and say, bro, look, I'm so sorry. I forgot to message you back. Or I started to
mm,
type it and Arnold's going to be like, cool, it's all good. And you continue the conversation. But the longer you leave it, the worse it gets. So don't leave
mm.
it so long. That's what I would say to myself.
Yeah, 100%, man.
What would you say?
Whew. Number one, I don't think you want it bad enough. legit, because
True.
I think, you know, when we really want something, bro, we really do it. And I think
Mm.
sometimes we think we want something, but we don't really want that thing as much as something else that we're saying yes to instead. So it's
Oh.
like, if you, let's use the food example, right? Very practical. I can
Mm.
say that I want to have a healthy body that functions at optimal performance and I want to live long, right? But that has a cost, right? Which involves
Yeah.
discipline and all of those things, right? So
Mm.
do I love, even if I don't love the means that it takes to get there, even if I don't love the discipline and all of that, right? If I say I love the
Mm.
outcome, the question is,
Mm.
do I love it more than the Krispy Kreme's donut or the cookies?
Mm.
And not even as a one, I'm
Mm.
talking about like living in that space and that place.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
think like the more that I've spent time even just reflecting on times where I've had successes, times where I've failed, times where I've struggled, times where I've flourished, um, these are some of the basic questions that I think I just have to get in my own face about and say, look, Arnold, you don't, and if you don't want it, that's okay. Just be real with yourself about it, right? Don't be
Mm.
delusional or deluded into thinking that you really want this thing as bad as you say you want it, but yet you're not
Mm.
willing to pay the cost that is required to get it. And number two is, do you understand the cost, right?
Mm.
Because
Mm.
again, discipline, I think, is a very key thing that you've mentioned. And I think it's the thing that we all try to avoid, like as much as we best possibly can. But the truth is, it is a part of the cost. It is oftentimes the
Yep.
uncomfortable thing that we don't want. But
Mm.
again, connected to the desire that we have I really assessed what it's going to go? Because even discipline has levels and layers, right? And different ways that it plays out in terms of what's required. It might have to do with the time that you wake up and the time you go to bed. It might have to do with the decisions that you make concerning, depending what your goal is, what you're going to eat, what you're going to drink, when you're going to eat, when you're going to drink. It might have to do with the social events you say yes to and the ones you say no to. It might have something to do
Mm.
with how you choose to spend your money or not. Like
Mm.
the level of
Mm.
comfort that you accept
Mm.
or not, right?
Mm.
And I
Mm.
think sitting and really asking those questions up front a lot more, I think can lead to better outcomes. And I think the other thing on discipline as well that you said that is worth mentioning is that I and I think you alluded to it as well, and you mentioned it in passing as well. But discipline isn't just like this isolated thing in one area of life.
Mm.
If you find a disciplined person, you'll usually find that they're quite disciplined across various parts of their life.
Everything. Yeah. Yeah.
And equally, if you find that you're struggling with discipline, you will probably find that if you search multiple areas of your life, you're probably not very disciplined in all of them, or
Mm.
in many of
Yeah.
them, in fact, if not a majority.
Mm.
And I've just
Mm.
found that to be true in my own world. Like a practical example for me to even deal with that is having to find what is my tool to almost like shortcut discipline in the rest of my life. And for me, it's training. Like I've accepted it. This is part of my cost. If when I look at the times when I'm most optimal, training is at the root of it. Jesus is obviously my
Mm.
foundation. He's the one that I need to be saved. I'm not talking about all of that. I'm just saying in general, like in terms of practical stuff on earth that
Yeah.
are a very good shortcut for me to make sure for me to almost like disperse discipline across various areas. For me, it's training. And the reason why is
Mm.
because not because I love training, like more time than not, I don't like the cost that I have to go through. I don't like lifting those
Mm.
weights and hurting my muscles in order to do it. Right. I don't like getting on no cross trainer and doing this 30-minute plus run. I don't like it. I
Mm.
really don't like it.
Mm.
If I could,
Mm.
if I could understand like how to produce this special manner that would give me the same mental results that training does,
Yeah.
believe me, I'd go for it. Do you get what I'm saying?
Mm.
But
Mm.
through trial and error, through looking at the times when I've had most success across the board versus the times when I've had probably a lot more of a compromised version of outputs, failure, whatever you want to call it, training is at the root of it.
Mm.
And it's not because of, well, it is because of the mental kind of reps that are being done.
Mm.
Because
Mm.
the mind is behind a lot of the one thing that's consistent in all of these areas is the mind, right? It's the same
The
mind that's
mind.
going to be
Yeah.
making decisions on food.
Yep.
That's also going to make
Yep.
decisions on work, business, the time I go to bed, the
Mm.
time I wake up, whether I decide to stay up late watching that show or not. Like it's the same mind. And
Mm.
so because of that, when I'm in the gym, yes, I'm training my body, but really the big thing that's getting work is my
Mind.
mind. Like
Mm.
when I'm making
Mm.
a decision to say, am I going to cut this session in half, which sometimes is appropriate, but if I'm going to cut this session in half, or am I going to finish because I don't want to reinforce the habit of
Yes.
quitting,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And I think there's certain things in life, it might not be training for everybody, but I think there are certain things in life where we may find that there is something that we have, or maybe if we don't have, we maybe need to look for that will create
Mm.
that same thing within us and just help to push things further.
It's often discomfort, right? It's
Yeah.
places of discomfort. That's what it is, right? Because when you're in the gym and you're under the weight, it's discomfort. It's
Yeah.
uncomfortable, but you have to push through and you have to get to the other side of it. And that's
Mm,
what makes you stronger, is how you
mm,
handle discomfort.
mm. Yeah, for sure, man. For sure.
Hmm. So, just as we close, I want anybody who's listening to think about, what would you say to the you from last year?
Mm,
And say that thing to yourself so that you don't repeat this year. Unless you've
mm.
had an amazing year and there's nothing that you would want to do differently or better. If you have, we would love to have you on the podcast. But if
Come
you've
and teach
not,
us the ways.
you know, come and show us, Sensei. Because I think everybody, well, most people are going to look back over this year and see opportunities that they could have improved, things that
Mm,
they could have done better. So have that conversation now. You know, we're still over a month out from the beginning of the new year. Let's start with some momentum going into next year.
mm. Love that.
Mm. Thank you guys for listening, and we will see you on the next episode. Peace.
Peace.